What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for the single game showdown slate Thursday night football. It's week 10 already. Crazy. Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co founder here at Occupy Fantasy, single game $1 million winner. We will discuss the injuries that impact tonight's slate in this game, and there are quite a few. We will analyze low risk lineup construction tips and core plays, and our high risk strategies, picks, and ideas to get you those biggest prizes on DraftKings and FanDuel. Let's not waste any time. Let's get started. And if we start with the visiting Cincinnati Bengals, we'll start in their receiver room. So T. Higgins is doubtful, did not play last week with his injury, did not practice this week. We are fully expecting him to sit once again. So he is out. In addition to that, if you followed last week's games on Sunday, there was this Jermaine Burton fiasco. So Jermaine Burton is their rookie receiver. He balled out in the preseason, did great, was expected to have a pretty decent role this year, and by all indications, they built the game plan around him or heavily featuring him in week 9 last week, which is crazy to think about. Just a guy who hadn't done much really leading up until week 9, but they liked what they've seen from him in practice. They built this game plan heavily featuring him, and then he just didn't show up to work on Saturday. No call, no show. I'm sure many of you are well aware with that type of situation. And he was inactive on Sunday as a result. Team was not happy, as you can imagine. Joe Burrow chewed him out on the sideline. They asked Jamar Chase about it, and he was like, basically, he's a grown man. I'm not going to keep talking to him about it. Clearly, this has been some continuing issue for Jermaine Burton. All this being said, after being inactive last week, they're they're signing up for more punishment. They're going back to work with him this week. He practiced. He will play. They said. Now I can promise you he probably won't have an extensive role like he did last week or was expected to last week, or maybe he will, and maybe that one game punishment was enough. We'll see. You look and you see that if you look at his game log, week 8 was the first time he really got on the field, and he caught one target for 41, one of his 3 targets for 41 yards. And with T. Higgins out, maybe they thought he's the guy that can step into the number 2 role. So if we look at routes run, if we look at what happened last week, this is when T. Higgins was out and Jermaine Burton was out. Obviously, Jamar Chase, he ran the most routes for the Bengals at 43. Andre Yosivas, who's been their number 2 when T. Higgins has been out so far this year, he ran 40 routes. And then Trenton Irwin ran 11. Trenton Irwin is 1,800 on DraftKings. Oh, sorry, 1,200 on DraftKings. And then Kendrick Pryor, who's their fringe roster receiver, he ran 10 routes. Now you compare this to Week 8 when T. Higgins was out and Jermaine Burton played. It was Jamar Chase 40 routes. It was Yosivas 38 routes, and then it was Jermaine Burton with 17 routes. Clear number 3 receiver. Now, if they were building a game plan around him, you would expect that number to grow or have grown in Week 9. All this is to say that Chase is going to lead the way. Yoshi is still pretty solid in his number 2 role, and there's a decent chance that Burton either plays 0 snaps tonight, which we think it's unlikely, assuming he showed up for work today, or actually let's scroll up here, Jermaine Burton, or he runs 15 plus routes with the potential for 20 plus, and that would make him a pretty great value at $2,200. If he's not, it's probably Trenton Irwin who gets the bump, and so I think a great rule probably is one max of Jermaine Burton and Trenton Irwin in your lineups tonight, especially for large contests. You're not really considering these guys in smaller contests or low risk contests, but for large field GPPs or even just single entry GPPs, max 1 of Burton and Irwin. All right, enough talk about Cincinnati wide receivers. Let's talk about their running backs. Lots of positional things to discuss. Zach Moss placed on injured reserve, likely out for the regular season. In his absence last week, Chase Brown saw a massive, massive role. He got all 27 of the running back rushing attempts. Now, that's pretty unsustainable unless you're Kyron Williams and Sean McVay. But Chase Brown expected to lead the way for this team. But in order to try to replace some of the work and lessen some of his workload, the team traded for Khalil Herbert, who's a great running back in his own right, formerly of the Chicago Bears, has been effective, especially on the ground when he's gotten work in the NFL. Khalil Herbert, let's see, he is 2,800 on DraftKings. We don't expect him to get any ownership. He's not in the FanDuel player pool as of this morning. I imagine they'll add him this afternoon. Now, generally, you'll think that a guy who was added to the team on Monday or Tuesday, can he really get that much playing time? They asked Joe Burrow about it, and he said, he's standing right next to me. I'll just tell him what to do if I have to. Pretty simple for a running back. Hand the ball off or pass protection, Joe can tell him what to do. So I imagine Herbert gets run as the number 2 running back tonight, not Travion Williams. So pretty decent pivot or low owned, super low owned play, probably 1%, 2% Khalil Herbert in large field GPPs. And finally, at the tight end position, Mike Gesicki, if you faded him last week, he absolutely buried you with his 30-point DraftKings performance. Didn't run that many more routes than he normally runs. Just decided to completely have a ceiling game at massive ownership on the main slate. But Eric All, their rookie tight end, unfortunately tore his ACL again. He is out for the year. Now, he's been a guy that we've played on showdown slates in the past. If we look at how the routes shook out last week for Cincinnati tight ends, it was Gesicki 26 routes. It was Drew Sample 21 routes. Drew Sample 2,600. And then Tanner Hudson, $1,600, 9 routes. Now, we saw Tanner Hudson get work early in the year before Eric All kind of came on. So it's a good chance he gets back into things. And so you saw in week 1, 3 targets last week. I think 2 or 3 targets is a good expectation for Tanner Hudson, a good high-risk play while everyone plays Gesicki. All right, I think that does it for Cincinnati. Let's go over to Baltimore. Isaiah Likely, this game is full of injuries. Likely dealing with a hamstring injury. They're resting him. He will not play tonight. So that means Mark Andrews will be the number 1 tight end by default. He will be the highest owned cheap play on DraftKings without question tonight. And Charlie Kolar, who will also be popular, he's the number 2 tight end. They run a lot of 2 tight end sets in Baltimore. He's only $600 on DraftKings. We expect him to be 20% plus in the largest contest and much higher in smaller GPPs, as he allows you to jam anybody you want at the top of the salary board. Finally, Keaton Mitchell, who you see here, who was electric last year when he played, had a horrific knee injury. He is probably going to be activated and be active for tonight's game. We expect him to be the running back 3 at most tonight with Derrick Henry and Justice Hill, who's been great so far this year. So Keaton Mitchell will play absolute 1% large field GPP play only. Don't expect him to get much work if he is active. We'll know by 4 p.m. Eastern for Keaton Mitchell. We need the water break early today because, I mean, that's a lot of injuries to get through. All right, now digesting all of that as we transition to low-risk contests. 50-50s, double-ups, head-to-heads, just have to beat half the field to double your money. These are players that you put in these contests, but they're also the core plays for your high-risk contests as well. We like to play both quarterbacks, both running backs to lock up all the scoring. We have 2 workhorse running backs. We can make this work with the pricing tonight. So if we win something like this, let's actually get in both teams. Burrow, Chase Brown, $11.50. Generally, that is not enough to play a low-risk lineup. However, we have $600 Charlie Kolar, and we have $1,600 Tanner Hudson. We could easily make this work. Now, double punting is generally not the way to go in low-risk contests, but I can see a path where this works. Now, if you look around the industry, you look at industry optimal lineups and industry projections, the guy who actually gets left out here is Derrick Henry. Jamar Chase has a higher raw projection, and we're going to see something like this. This doesn't really allow you to do much else. You can maybe captain Chase Brown or captain Charlie Kolar, which would be crazy. Or you leave out Chase Brown himself, and you go something like this, Jackson, Chase, Burrow. The same goes for FanDuel as well, where obviously you can't fit all 4 in, per usual. The guy who gets left out of optimal lineups is Derrick Henry. Now, us simpletons, we just think Derrick Henry's been crushing this year. Is he really the guy we want to leave out of our low-risk lineups in favor of a wide receiver? No, on DraftKings especially. I think you pay up for it on DraftKings and you play those core 4 and you play that lineup I showed you or some version of that lineup with the 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs. Now, on FanDuel, it is different because, one, the pricing is kind of soft over here where Lamar is only 15.5. Generally, we would see him like 16.5, 17, maybe 17.5. And Jamar Chase is only $13,000. Generally, he would be 15K plus. I'm not sure what this pricing is about. Zay only $12,000. The pricing is super soft over here, so where you can actually save $2,000, $3,000 and get a decent. And in fact, you get, if not the same, the higher raw projection for Chase over Henry, and you get a lot more salary savings over here. So I think if you are playing on FanDuel, it is wiser if you're playing low risk contests to go something like this. Again, it's not great, but that's the option I would go. I think high-risk contests are a much better route tonight. If you want to play low-risk, you certainly can. The paths are there. Just some very tough decisions to make. I much prefer to play high-risk contests tonight, which we'll talk about now. All right. Some high-risk ideas and strategies. Let's go back to DraftKings. Let's go player-specific first. And just mentioning Derrick Henry, we have him low-owned across the board. The 4th highest projected owned MVP on FanDuel, just 6% projected captain on DraftKings. I mean, we're getting into November. We are in November. It's December almost. Derrick Henry, 6%. Listen, I'm not a guy that typically plays Derrick Henry, but I will play him at 6%. That is for damn sure. So Derrick Henry's got to be the best high risk cap tonight. It's not even close, just based on his upside and his ownership. Point blank. All right, so that's easy. Step one. That's the only thing you want to take from this video to play Derrick Henry at captain. You can do that. Other ways to get different. Let's look at Deontay Johnson just really quickly. I don't think he'll see a big jump in playing time. Everything they said was he's going to be a reserve depth receiver for us. And that kind of played out in week 1. They talked about the number of routes he would run. Now, I imagine he overtakes Nelson Aguilar full-time pretty shortly. Maybe he eats into Rashad Bateman. But at just $4,800, there's a path where he catches a touchdown or gets a few catches and ends up in the optimal lineup. Because there are so many other values that he's competing with, Mark Andrews, super popular. Charlie Kolar at the bottom. Jermaine Burton. Who else here? Drew Sample, the tight ends. Deontay Johnson's not going to be owned. 1%, 5% max. So great high-risk play if you think he can expand on his passing game role from last week. Remember, he just got to Baltimore last week, late last week. So another few days under his belt with the playbook. Maybe Deontay Johnson's a great high-risk play. Not my favorite version, but a guy I think you can mix in that strategy. Now, we talked about the Cincinnati tight end rotation. Gesicki going to still be popular despite his price increase, despite being $6,600 on a showdown slate. Because he scored 30 points last week and looked good doing it, he's going to be popular tonight. They're still going to rotate. They're going to rotate in Drew Sample. They're going to rotate in Tanner Hudson even. So I really like playing those guys instead of Gesicki. You could play a Joe Burrow with both of those guys lineup. I don't think that's a problem at all. I would probably pick one of the three, especially with Gesicki's pricing. Tanner Hudson is the guy that we've always liked, but all three are in play, and I think you get the super cheap, super low-owned pivot away from Gesicki in either Sample or Tanner Hudson. Our model likes Sample a little bit better, so we'll err on the side of caution with Sample there, but both of those guys, Sample and Tanner Hudson, are in play tonight, especially with people playing Charlie Kolar. These are great. You spend a little bit more and perhaps even have a little bit of a higher ceiling with those guys. We already talked about Khalil Herbert being another 1% play. So Deontay Johnson, Khalil Herbert, 2 1% owned plays today. So, and actually good players. Normally we play 1% plays and they're actually fringe NFL guys, fringe NFL talents. Herbert's a great player. Deontay Johnson's a great player. So I would like to bet on those guys and just hope that the playing time follows. All right, Cincinnati wide receivers. We already talked about that as well. Chase going to be extremely popular. Josivas, he's going to be in the mix. A normally owned player at, $3,400, too cheap for him. I don't know why he's only $3,400. He'll be popular as well. So Jermaine Burton, I think you lean into the Jermaine Burton. The team's trying to get him the ball. He learned his lesson. I think he's a great high-risk play, Jermaine Burton. I'll probably play him heavily tonight. I think we lean into it. Let's listen for national reporters or maybe pregame reports on his expected usage and involvement. But it seems like he's gotten the message, as he should have. And as long as he shows up for work today, he's in a good spot. And the team clearly wants to get him the ball. So Jermaine Burton, probably the best high-risk play of this group down here. Now, if we think about captain and MVP, by the way, let's just look at these prices on FanDuel, just so you guys know. Jermaine Burton is $6,500. Irwin is $5,500. Josivas, $7,500. So all these guys are super cheap. If you look at the tight end pricing, Gesicki's $9,500. Tanner Hudson is the min price, $5,000. And Drew Sample is $6,000. So lots of cheap guys. And most are pretty low owned because they cannibalize a lot of each other's ownership. So not one guy gets too popular on FanDuel, which is great for large field GPPs especially. Now, on FanDuel, we'll stick with FanDuel. Lamar Jackson we have as the most popular MVP by far. But he's in a game with a lot of guys who can outscore him. Derrick Henry, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and maybe Chase Brown, Zay Flowers if they get multiple touchdowns. So it's very clear we have these types of slates in the past. What you can do is you either lock Lamar Jackson into all of your lineups and you play as many low-owned players with him as you can, like you rotate those guys through. I do think it's a really viable strategy tonight. Anytime there are a bunch of low-owned plays, I like playing cheat code MVP quarterbacks in all of my lineups and just trying to get the right combo if they're right. Tonight's a night like that. Same goes for DraftKings. Not going to be as highly owned, obviously, with the 6 roster spots and the salary multiplier, but we still have Lamar Jackson 25% plus at the captain spot. And I think the same concept applies here. You could play Henry or Chase or Burrow, mixing those guys, Chase Brown, even get kind of crazy and play a cheaper guy and fit in one more stud. Or you could play Lamar, who has the highest floor and ceiling on the slate, and just mix in the variety of low-owned guys. And really this comes down to your risk tolerance and your ability and your confidence in being able to create unique lineups with the popular captain. Because just because he's 25% owned and we have cheaper guys and low-owned guys, there's still going to be a lot of duplications to avoid. So depending on how much you read the Showdown Guide, how much you have read the Daily Plug, how much you have built these types of lineups in the past will dictate whether you lock in Lamar Jackson into your captain MVP spot in your mass multi-entry or your 3-max, or you fade him and you play Henry, Chase, Burrow, some of these other guys, and try to hope that they are the optimal captain or MVP instead of Lamar. All right. That'll do it for this video. Appreciate you watching. As always, Daily Plug will be up this afternoon. Model and Builder are up and running with projected ownership and our OF index projections. We hit 10K subscribers. Appreciate you guys so much. Going to have details soon on that subscriber giveaway, that 10K subscriber giveaway here on YouTube. So stay tuned for that. If you're not subscribed, still subscribe. Mutually beneficial, helps us out more than you know, and you get notified when we go live or upload videos. Give us that thumbs up. We appreciate it. Any questions, comment on the video below. Give your predictions. Always love hearing your predictions for the slate. Chat with each other in the comments below. And if you have questions, I will answer them before the slate starts tonight. So Brian for Occupy, thank you for listening as always. And good luck in tonight's Bengals and Ravens showdown slate.